What happens when a hornet invades a beehive? The bees launch a terrifying defense almost immediately, swarming the intruder until it's completely buried beneath layers of their bodies. Then, they begin vibrating their wing muscles while clinging tightly together. This creates an intense wave of heat, pushing the hornet's body temperature to around 115 degrees Fahrenheit within just a few minutes. The trapped hornet becomes dangerously overheated and struggles to breathe as the tightly packed bees surround it, essentially cooking the invader alive.
What if the most dangerous part of a hornet attack isn't the bee's stingers, but the temperature inside the swarm? What makes this behavior so fascinating is that the bees are essentially turning their own bodies into a biological weapon, but there's an important scientific detail that makes the situation even more interesting. This isn't simply a case of more bees equals more heat. When Japanese honeybees face certain hornets, they can form what scientists call a hot defensive bee ball. Hundreds of workers surround the attacker and press tightly against one another. The bees then activate their flight muscles, producing heat even though they aren't actually flying. Studies have recorded temperatures inside these defensive balls reaching roughly 46 degrees or about 115 F. And the temperature is right around the dangerous limit for some hornets. But here's where the story gets even crazier. Heat may not be working alone. Researchers found that carbon dioxide can build up inside the tightly packed bee ball, reaching concentrations of around 3.6%. Experiments suggest that this elevated CO2 combined with the heat can make the environment considerably more lethal to the trapped hornet. In other words, the bees aren't simply creating an oven, they are creating a tiny enclosed environment where temperature and air quality both become dangerous. Think about that for a second. The hornet basically walks into a room where the thermostat is broken, the ventilation system has stopped working, and hundreds of angry roommates have decided to surround it. And there's another surprising detail. The bees themselves have to survive this temperature. Research shows the lethal temperature for the bees under comparable conditions is higher than the temperature reached inside the defensive ball. That actually gives them a narrow thermal advantage. They can tolerate the conditions long enough to overwhelm the hornet before suffering the same fate. This is also a great example of why calling animals smart isn't quite enough. No individual bee needs to understand thermodynamics. Instead, thousands of relatively simple behaviors combine into something that looks almost like a coordinated military strategy. And this defense isn't universal among all honeybees either. Japanese honeybees are particularly famous for this behavior, while European honeybees are generally much less effective at forming the same kind of lethal heat ball against giant hornets. That difference is a reminder that evolution doesn't give every species the same weapons, it gives them strategies shaped by the predators they regularly encounter. So, what's the solution when hornets threaten a hive? For beekeepers, the answer obviously isn't to recreate a giant bee barbecue. Prevention, monitoring, and protecting vulnerable colonies are much safer approaches. The fascinating lesson here is that bees already have an incredibly sophisticated defense system built into their collective behavior. And honestly, that might be the scariest part. Because when a hornet attacks, it isn't fighting hundreds of individual bees anymore. It's fighting one giant living organism made of hundreds of tiny bodies, and that organism knows exactly how to turn up the heat.